Chapter 28, Steering Systems and Integral Steering Gears. Day 1, Video 1, Introduction. When we're talking about the steering system, the importance of the steering system and any faults or errors we find in the steering system is extremely important that those are dealt with in the proper way. We call the steering a life and limb system, meaning that the importance of it can have injury or life-taking capabilities if we have an error in that. A lot of times what we're talking about is not just the operator or the payload that he's driving, or the truck, the value of that. If he has a problem with the steering system and he loses control, there's potential there to either hurt the driver, damage the vehicle, but also we need to take into account all the other cars and pedestrians and stuff around that vehicle if that happens, if we lose control. So as a technician, we need to be extremely careful on the way that we make repairs to the steering system, and that the way that we inspect it, because it is such an important system in the safety of the truck, the driver, and then everyone else around. Different components that we're going to talk about are different parts of the steering system: steering wheel, column, steering gear, power assist, and then the linkage that is connects all the different components of the steering system. We'll touch on each of those. One of the important parts we'll talk about here is our steering gear. The job of the steering gear is to increase, well, first of all, what it does is takes the rotational motion that the driver inputs through the steering wheel and turns it into a linear motion, so that those linkage and the rest of the steering system can use that. Then also to multiply the steering effort of the driver. We can have a driver of average strength being able to safely turn a truck at 80,000 pounds combined weight or over. So the job of that steering gear is to multiply that effort, so that it makes it easy to do that. One of the problems we have if we have high multiplication effort of the steering gear is that it reduces the road feel. So the driver needs to have a certain amount of input back from the road to the tires through the linkage steering gear up through the column and into the steering wheel, so he can tell if it's pulling to the right or pulling to the left, or you hit a rough patch in the road or a groove in the road. That input is put back to the operator, the driver. It's very important that that happens. Different components again that we're going to talk about that make up the total steering system: steering wheels, columns, miter boxes, any of the shafts, or the tilt if we've got a tilt steering column. We can have single or dual steering gears depending on the application, and then all the other linkage that connects everything together: the pitman arms, drag links, tie rods, that sort of stuff. We will hit on the power steering pumps and lines, the importance of those, and then if we've got collision avoidance or lane departure, we'll have a steering angle sensor so that the ECU knows the driver's input into the steering, and how that comes into play with the collision avoidance in those systems. From the diagram here, we've got a basic picture of the steering system. We don't have the steering column or steering shaft or steering wheel connecting into the steering gearbox, but otherwise here's the rest of the system. So there are steering gear that takes that rotational motion, converts it into a linear motion with our pitman arm. Pitman arm transfers that linear motion through the drag link to our steering arm, through the spindle that turns that tire right to left, and then now we need to take that motion from the driver's side and send it over to the passenger side, and we'll do that through our Ackerman arms, tie rods, cross tube, and tend to so that the passenger side steer wheel turns in relationship to the driver's side steering tire. One of the important things to note is due to the heavy-duty nature of the truck, we're still using a solid I-beam front axle. In technology terms, as far as automotive, that was a holdover from the 40s and 50s and partly into the 60s. But we're using that on the over-the-road trucks still, just because of the load carrying capacity and just the heavy-duty nature of that axle. Lends itself very well to the over-the-road trucks.